Alright, so I figured that sometimes we hear a lot about shows we like from people who love it or hate it, but I have YouTuber friends who love reading but also haven't read TBATE. So I felt like it was an easy problem to solve. Cause you guys know how I feel about TBATE and I know how people who've read TBATE feel about it, but I don't know how someone who goes in blind will feel. See, YouTube is a weird platform. Every single time I made a you should read video, the only people who tend to see it are people who are searching for that name or topic I'm talking about, which kinda defeats the purpose. If the algorithm decides to share the video, it ends up recommending the video to people who just watched a Jay-Z clip or some crazy ASMR. So I said,
fine, I'll do it myself.
I asked those friends to read TBATE and talk about it almost a year ago, I'm sorry. But I only asked the friends with channels because I don't want anyone to use the phone to record anything for us to listen to, and I don't want to hear any underwater type audio. So here's the thought process. I wanted them to start from the beginning. Sounds stupid, but we don't have a JoJo watch order or anything, and I actually wanted to give them an easy goal to reach and one that I thought would serve as a good cliffhanger. So I asked them to read only up to chapter 10. It's easy enough and it has one of the first few hype moments in the series while also slightly making it deviate from Mushoku Tensei, because the comparisons will come whether we like it or not. Now I have 3 friends. Wait. This video features 3 friends, Tensa, RJ, and Odd Lion. One of them would criticize without remorse and is great because he has no bias towards the show, and not say the others would, but they're not as savage, I would say. So naturally, we'll start with one of the more relaxed views.
So, the beginning after the end. After months and months of hearing nothing but good about this series, I finally decided to pick it up and give it a read at the request of my good friend Nova. And my thoughts on it? I think it's pretty damn good. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit concerned with the start. After all, there's no shortage of anime, manga, novels, and webtoons that start out in a similar fashion. You know, the whole getting reincarnated into another world as an overpowered force to be reckoned with. Luckily though, it manages to separate itself from its peers early on, which is something that I find extremely important to do if you intend on creating a story that isn't just a carbon copy of all the other stories it shares a genre with. This is especially surprising considering that I've only read a few chapters of the manhwa, and yet I can already see how it's slowly but surely managing to distinguish itself from the crowd. From the beginning, we see that even in his past life, the main character, Arthur Leywin, was a capable and admirable king with great knowledge of his world. He dies an unexpected and mysterious death, which leads him to getting reborn in another world, while retaining all the memories of his past life. And many stories with a similar foundation, sometimes this is the case for other MCs, and sometimes it isn't. But this story is one that I believe really makes you feel the benefit and impact of the knowledge that our main character manages to carry over from his former life. In retaining his mental capacity, he's able to make connections between how this world works compared to his old one very early on, giving him a great advantage in how fast he develops and how he goes about navigating the beginning of his new life. He's quick to learn that the world around him is an archaic one, due in part to its sophisticated magic standing in for its lack of technological development. Furthermore, he learns about the continent he was born in, the kingdoms that it's comprised of, and the system of monarchy wherein rulership was passed down rather than earned through merit and recognition. Most impressive of all, however, is the proficiency he shows in learning to control his mana or magical power, thanks to the familiarity that exists between this force and the one from his old world called Ki. His willingness to move on from his overwhelmingly successful past life, whilst taking its valuable experiences and applying them to his new life, in a world he is genuinely curious about no less, makes for an interesting take that you don't usually see in this type of story. I'm also a fan of how fast everything seems to be progressing. I know the way I say that makes it sound like I'm the type of person that can't sit through a little bit of dialogue without getting bored and always wants non-stop action, but it's actually the opposite. I just think it shows a level of self-awareness that the author, Turtle-Me, has in not making things too slow for people who don't want to sit through dozens of chapters of Arthur soiling his diaper. I love how the story doesn't drag on and is able to skip forward to points in time that are pivotal to Arthur's life, with each time skip not overstaying its welcome, but doing a great job at showcasing his development during those times. I stopped reading around chapter 10, after the events of Arthur and his parents promptly beginning their journey to Xyrus City to find him a mentor acquainted by their old friends from the Twin Horns. I think Arthur describes this part best when he says that he's been living in a bubble for too long, as after a relatively smooth start to their journey, they get attacked by a large horde of bandits with seemingly no chance of victory without considerable loss. It shows us the truth that this world, unfortunately, also has its fair share of ill-natured people. which Arthur will need to fight against one day. Turtle Me once again makes it clear that this story will have more than its fair share of tension and action-packed moments that can be sprung onto you at the drop of a coin. As I finished the 10th chapter, I'm glad to say that I was practically at the edge of my seat wanting more, and I fully intend on sticking with this story from its beginning to its end. P.S. Jasmine is best girl so far.
I don't know. Let's get the bad out of the way before we get into the good. So Nova told me that people compare this to Mushoku Tensei. I see why. If Mushoku Tensei was Naruto, this was Black Clover. The start of this series is near identical to Mushoku Tensei, other than the fact that the previous life of the main character, Arthur, was a king instead of, a closet weeb. That was, I think, a major flaw. It didn't feel original. It felt like I was reading the Mushoku Tensei copycat at the beginning, especially the first 2 chapters. Also, it has a kind of average power system and world building as of the first 10 chapters. Nothing really stood out. It was just your standard fantasy, and then it included like this argumenters and conjurers, so kind of like a Nen type thing of types of mages, which was nice and was like a little touch on its own, but still didn't stand out nearly enough to have any certain impact. And finally, the final bad point is the main character is kind of bland to me. Arthur is just your typical guy that got isekai'd, even if he was a king back in his day. He studied, he did everything Rudius did without the extra pizzazz that makes Rudius stand out from everyone else. He was kind of just doing what the story needed him to do, and I really didn't get much of his character from any of this. Like he felt like MC, the character. Let's get to the good. Okay, guys, let's get to the good. Good character design. Finally met the father Ray's party. I was like, oh, okay, good character design. Really good character design. Six 6.5 out of 10.
The beginning of the Rain is one of those isekais where at first I thought that it would be, well, like every other isekai, but I was pleasantly surprised. The aspect I like most from the first chunk of chapters that I read are that it's a lot more laid back and relaxing than I expected it to be. The first chunk focuses on art, trying to figure out how to use his mana, or how to manifest his mana. And while he's trying to do that, we see a nice family relationship between Art and his parents. And I loved that aspect because it's a very simple start, but it makes sure to set up, the background of characters and some mystery of, how did Art die in his previous life? We do see a lot of Art's, past life through flashbacks every now and then, which I liked that this isekai didn't jump right into like big goals or just goals in general. It's a very relaxing and slow start, which I like, because now we know the characters and the way they are, the way they act, etc. Even though the beginning after the end does start very similar to Mushoku Tensei, art isn't a perf, which I like. So it's already a better start than most other isekais. I do like the characters purely based off of that. They're not over dramatic, and they don't over exaggerate at moments like fights or emotional moments, etc. Other characters feel very mature, which is rare to find in most isekais. Some small things I enjoyed was that we saw an actual map of this new world that art was born into, which shows us the three kingdoms and other locations as well, which I loved that we actually know, that this, how this world looks like with the map that we saw in the beginning. I really do hope that the beginning after the end doesn't try to have gigantic goals. I enjoyed TBATE so far because it feels like a isekai slice of life, laid back, and I love that. So I do hope we get to have more of that instead of doing too many big things. TBATE does set up a lot of plot points, like where are Art's parents, what is this mysterious woman inside this rock or cave. I like that we do have some goals and they don't seem too big. I might have only read about 12 or so chapters, but the beginning after the end is definitely top 3 isekai.
Nice.